When my neighbor Delilah Thornburg crushed my mailbox for the 7th time in 2 months, I realized we weren't just neighbors anymore. We were at war. But here's what she didn't know. I wasn't just going to rebuild it. I was going to craft her the mailbox of her nightmares. A.M. I stumbled outside, still half asleep, wearing yesterday's work clothes, the sour tang of diesel fumes clinging to the cold air. Where my handcrafted oak mailbox once stood, the one I'd spent 3 weekends sanding, staining, and perfecting from my grandfather's old design, there was now nothing but ruin. Splinters and jagged pieces of wood scattered across the damp pavement like confetti after a storm. My coffee mug slipped. The ceramic hit the driveway with a crack that felt like a slap. Scalding coffee splashed across my boots and ankles. But the real burn came from what I saw next. Delilah. Reversing her spotless white SUV out of her driveway, chrome bumper dented, a streak of oak-colored paint marking the damage. The taste of fury is metallic, sharp, bitter, like biting a live wire. That's when it hit me. She wasn't careless. She was deliberate. She wanted a fight, fine by me. She'd just picked one with the wrong guy. What would you do if someone kept destroying your property? Tell me where you're watching from. Does this kind of madness happen where you live too? Let me rewind for a second. My name's Marcus Ricks. I'm 52, recently divorced, and Willowbrook subdivision was supposed to be my clean slate. After 2 decades in the Navy Seabees, the folks who build runways under fire and throw up bridges while people are shooting at them, I figured civilian life would be a breeze. Retirement meant swapping my hard hat for a tool belt, picking up a few handyman gigs and maybe finally finding peace. The house was exactly what I wanted. Small, ranch-style home on Maple Street, solid bones, a yard that caught morning light. The kind of place where you fix things yourself and nod to neighbors who actually smile back. That's what the realtor promised. What she didn't mention was the HOA Willowbrook Homeowners Association. Founded in 1987, and with more regulations than a military manual and twice the arrogance. Everything had to match, the lawns, the driveways, even the mailboxes. The streets were picture perfect. Trimmed hedges, 3 shades of beige siding, and rules for everything down to the color of your mulch. And sitting at the top of this pastel kingdom was Delilah Thornburg, age 47, real estate agent, self-declared enforcer of suburban order. Picture-perfect hair, shellacked blonde that didn't dare move in the wind. Designer athleisure she never broke a sweat in. And that white Escalade, shining like a marble statue of entitlement. She wasn't just any neighbor. She was the HOA treasurer. 6 years straight, never challenged. The first time I met her was the morning I installed my grandfather's mailbox, the same design he used to teach me carpentry as a kid. Solid oak, hand-carved, a peaked little roof that reminded me of summers in his workshop. The smell of cedar and linseed oil hanging in the air. I was tightening the last screw when I heard heels clicking on my driveway. "Excuse me," came a voice that managed to sound both sweet and sharp. "I'm Delilah Thornburg, HOA board treasurer." I wiped sawdust off my hands. "Yes, ma'am. Something I can help you with?" Her smile was polished, professional but cold. "That mailbox doesn't meet Willowbrook's aesthetic standards." I straightened. "Pretty sure it does. I read the bylaws twice. Dimensions, height, materials, all within spec." Her lips tightened. "Perhaps you misunderstood our visual harmony requirements. We value consistency here. Property values depend on it." The way she said consistency made it clear she meant people like me. I pulled up the saved screenshots on my phone. Section 4.3, natural wood construction permitted. Max height 36 inches. Earth tone stain acceptable. "Looks compliant to me," I said. That's when the mask cracked. "Mr. Ricks," she said, dragging out my name. "Rules are one thing. Fitting in is another. I'm sure a man with your background understands the importance of maintaining order." The way she said background told me she already knew I was ex-military. I just smiled. "Mailbox stays," her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." Click, click. 3 photos of my mailbox taken like evidence in a crime scene. Then she turned, climbed into her Escalade, and rolled away, the engine humming like it was smug. That was Tuesday. By Friday, my mailbox looked like it had been run over by God himself. Posts snapped clean, the roof shattered, pieces scattered across 2 lawns. Even my flower bed, the one my granddad used to say made a house feel like home, was crushed flat. I called the police. Officer Jim Martinez showed up about an hour later. Good man, decent handshake, the kind who actually listened, until I mentioned the HOA. Then his expression dimmed. "Look, Mr. Ricks," he said, shutting his notepad with a sigh. "Without video proof or witnesses, it's just your word against hers. Happens more often than you'd think." 2 days later, a letter showed up. Heavy cream paper, thick enough to feel expensive. Gold-embossed header, Thornburg and Associates, legal consulting. The message? My mailbox was in violation of community harmony standards and posed a visual disruption to neighborhood aesthetics. I had 72 hours to remove it or face fines, $500 per day, $500 a day. The letter even smelled like arrogance. But if there's one thing 20 years in the CBs teaches you, it's that paperwork is just another kind of weapon, and people who use it usually have weak ground beneath them, so I decided to dig. The county courthouse smelled like dust and regret, old marble floors, flickering fluorescent lights that made every file look haunted. Janet, the records clerk, kind eyes, strong coffee, helped me pull the HOA's original incorporation documents from 1987. Perfectly legal. Public record. And let me tell you, what I found in those pages? Fascinating reading. The original Willowbrook bylaws, believe it or not, were downright sensible. Keep your grass trimmed. Don't paint your house purple. Park your cars in the garage. The usual suburban commandments. But buried deep in Section 12 was a little treasure most residents probably never noticed, and it changed everything. It stated that any rule modifications required a formal homeowner vote, a 60% approval, and 30 days written notice before enforcement. I compared those dusty originals to Delilah's shiny, modern list of community standards. The result? A bombshell. 90% of her rules had never been officially approved. She wasn't maintaining order. She was running her own private regime, fueled by vanity and printed on expensive letterhead. Back in the Navy, we had a saying, if you want to win a war, learn your enemy's supply lines. So naturally, my next target was her financial records. Janet. The courthouse clerk gave me that look, 1 part curiosity, 1 part warning, but stamped my request anyway. "Most folks never think to follow the money," she said, sliding the papers back. And she was right. You'd be shocked how much cash circulates inside these miniature neighborhood governments. While waiting for those documents, I launched my own operation. Every phone call, every doorstep encounter with Delilah, every HOA notice, recorded, dated, and archived. I kept it all inside a green military-issue notebook, the same kind we used for field logs overseas. The ink bled slightly on the edges, but the details were sharp. Tuesday brought an unexpected ally. I opened my front door to find Ruth Kowalski, holding a plate of oatmeal cookies and a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Ruth was 78, retired paralegal, mind like a laser scalpel, and apparently Willowbrook's very own neighborhood spy network. "Thought you might need backup," she said, settling into my kitchen chair with the satisfied sigh of someone who's been waiting years to spill secrets. The cookies were warm. The folder was dynamite. Ruth had been quietly tracking HOA misconduct for years, snapping photos, recording meetings, collecting emails. A one-woman intelligence unit that could have outperformed half the CIA. "Delilah's got a system," she said, spreading photos across my table like evidence boards from a detective show. 3 families in 5 years, all bullied until they sold under market value. Then she swoops in and handles the sale herself. She pointed to the pattern. The Watanabe family, fined repeatedly for improper landscaping until they sold and fled to Phoenix. The Hendersons, targeted for noise violations because their teenager played guitar after dinner. Each home sold under Delilah's real estate banner, Prestige Properties, and then flipped within months for profit. She controls the listings, manipulates comps, and rotates buyers, Ruth said. "It's not about property values. It's about power and profit. That old metallic taste crept back, the one that comes with fury and disgust. This wasn't about a mailbox anymore. This was organized harassment for financial gain. That night, as I dug through state HOA statutes, a memory from my Navy legal training clicked. Even homeowner associations have due process obligations, hearings, written notices, appeal rights. Most homeowners never fight back because they assume the HOA has total authority. They don't. They just pretend they do. Wednesday morning, I began construction on Mailbox Mark II. Same blueprint my grandfather designed, same oak joinery that made the wood grains shimmer like gold. But this time I added a secret, a hidden camera inside the roof peak. Infrared, motion-triggered, and streaming directly to the cloud. It stood proudly for 4 days. Then at 3 a.m. Sunday morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I rubbed my eyes, opened the feed, and there it was. A dark SUV creeping down Maple Street with its headlights off, moving slow and deliberate. The figure that stepped out was fast, practiced, swinging a baseball bat with the precision of someone who'd done this before. 2 minutes later, my hard work was rubble again, but this time I wasn't angry. I was watching the entire thing live, crystal clear infrared footage. And when the bat connected, I caught a perfect shot of the SUV's rear quarter panel, the same dent I'd seen on Delilah's Escalade. She'd just signed her own confession. I smiled in the dark. If she wanted escalation, I'd give her engineering-level vengeance. Her counterattack came that Thursday morning, taped right to my front door. A petition, written in perfect cursive and dripping with false concern. Willowbrook residents demand action against disruptive neighbor. The accusations read like a tabloid: illegal home business, excessive noise, aggressive behavior. 12 signatures. I recognized maybe 3, and half looked suspiciously identical. The page trembled in my hand, not from fear, but from sheer controlled rage. By noon, the dominoes started falling. The city noise control office called first, then business licensing, then code enforcement. Someone had filed multiple complaints in perfect coordination. Suddenly, I was accused of running an unlicensed construction company, hosting loud parties and building unauthorized structures. Every call meant an inspection. Every inspection meant time off work to explain to yet another official that I wasn't running a criminal ring, just a retired guy fixing sinks for beer money. It was a bureaucratic siege, precise and calculated. I caught myself chewing a nail, tasting that same iron tang of stress, as the third inspector measured my flower bed with a high-end laser tool that probably cost more than my truck. That evening, desperation sent me to Jorge Santos's garage 2 doors down. He was the kind of neighbor who lent tools and whose kids loved playing on my lawn. More importantly, his ring cameras covered half the street. "This is insane, man," Jorge said, waving me inside. His garage smelled like solder and machine oil, circuit boards scattered like confetti. "Maria and I have been watching what she's pulling." It's straight-up harassment. He pulled up the past week's footage, fingers flying across his keyboard. Frame by frame, we watched Delilah's door-to-door smear campaign, clipboard in hand, pointing at my property, shaking her head in exaggerated disapproval. "She told Mrs. Patterson you were running some kind of construction scam," Jorge said, rewinding to a timestamp. "Claimed you were tanking property values and threatening the HOA's reputation." Lucky for me, Jorge was paranoid in the best way. Being a cybersecurity analyst meant he'd set up automatic cloud backups for every second of footage. "Delilah doesn't realize," he said, grinning, "that she's starring in her own evidence reel." Then he pulled something from a shelf. A tiny body camera, no bigger than a lighter. "I use this when I walk the dog," he said. "My rule's simple. Document everything, trust nothing." By Friday evening, we got our break. Jorge's dog, conveniently, needed a very long walk past the community center, right as Delilah hosted her emergency neighborhood safety meeting. Through the massive glass windows, we could see her in full performance mode, laser pointer in hand, PowerPoint glowing behind her, red circles drawn around photos of my house. The crisp autumn wind carried her voice clearly through the cracked windows of the community center. "Property values are our top priority," Delilah announced, tone drenched in fake concern. "But safety comes first. We have a resident exhibiting aggressive behavior, violating community standards, and showing blatant disrespect toward our long-term homeowners." Her words flowed like venom disguised as honey. She wasn't just undermining me. She was publicly erasing my reputation, painting me as the unstable outsider threatening their carefully curated paradise. Her slideshow clicked forward. There it was, my so-called non-compliant mailbox, photos of my unauthorized flower bed, and a shot of my truck parked in my own driveway, labeled commercial vehicle violation, and then she said it, the line that would come back to destroy her. "I've been in real estate for 15 years, she declared, clicking confidently to the next slide. "I know how one problem property can devastate an entire community's equity. We're protecting your retirement, your children's future, and the financial stability you've worked decades to build." Behind her, a red graph bled across the screen, showing an alleged 5-year drop in Willowbrook property values. Ominous, convincing, and completely fake. What Delilah didn't know was that Jorge, sitting beside me, could spot falsified data faster than most people could read a sentence. He leaned closer and whispered, "Those numbers are garbage. I pulled real sales data for my refinance last month. Values are up 12% in 3 years. There it was, proof of fraud." Delilah had doctored her presentation to terrify homeowners into compliance. We had her cornered, and she didn't even know it yet. The meeting ended with her announcing an emergency HOA board session for Tuesday night. The topic? Immediate action required for community safety. That night, my garage transformed into mission control. Ruth arrived armed with her evidence folders, Jorge brought his laptop, and I brewed coffee strong enough to melt paint. Fluorescent lights buzzed above us as we spread papers across my workbench like military maps before a strike. "She's panicking," Ruth said, studying the forged petition signatures through magnifying lenses that made her look like an assassin in reading glasses. The speed of her escalation screams pressure. Someone's pushing her to resolve this fast. Jorge's fingers danced over his keyboard, pulling up real estate listings. "Check this out," he said. "Prestige Properties, Delilah's company, that currently has 3 Willowbrook homes under contract. Each priced 15 to 20% below market." He turned the laptop toward us. "If she's claiming property values are falling because of you, Marcus, that's exactly what helps her business model. She needs panic." The air in the garage thickened with the sour scent of conspiracy and old coffee. Delilah wasn't just harassing me out of spite. She was engineering a neighborhood crisis to justify buying homes cheap and flipping them for profit. Every family she'd bullied had sold to her firm. Every rule she bent fed her bottom line. Tuesday was going to be her reckoning. When the day came, it felt like judgment hour. The air was cool, sharp with the smell of burning leaves and fear. The emergency HOA meeting was set for 7 p.m. in the community center. That beige monument to suburban conformity still reeking of carpet cleaner and 30 years of stale politics. By 6:30, the parking lot overflowed. More residents than I'd ever seen were packed inside, whispering, waiting. Delilah had built this moment like a show trial. I was the villain. I arrived right on time, dressed in my best navy shirt. Not a uniform, but a statement. Ruth walked at my left, calm and composed. Jorge flanked my right, carrying a backpack stuffed with recording gear like a covert tech operative. The room buzzed with anticipation, that metallic tension that tastes like pennies on your tongue. 40-plus residents filled the folding chairs, their chatter dimming as I entered. That's him. About time. Property values. Man, he's killing them. Delilah took command of the podium like a general before her troops. Her armor, a dark blazer, flawless hair, and a projector beaming the HOA logo beside the words, "Emergency Action, Community Safety and Property Protection." Behind her sat the council, Cornelius Blackwood, tanned and smug in his golf polo, Sandra Mills gripping her notepad like a shield, and poor Robert Jules staring down at the floor like he wished he could vanish. Thank you all for attending on such short notice, Delilah began, her voice smooth and poisonous. We face a grave threat to our neighborhood's safety and unity. Click. My house appeared on the massive screen like a criminal mugshot. Red arrows stabbed at my mailbox, my flower bed, my driveway, each labeled violation. For the past month, she continued, we've documented multiple offenses by Mr. Marcus Hicks, unapproved construction, non-conforming structures, and the presence of commercial equipment on residential property. Worse yet, he has displayed aggressive behavior toward residents. A murmur spread through the crowd. Disapproval, judgment, betrayal. I could feel it like static against my skin. Mrs. Patterson shook her head. The Johnsons whispered as if discussing a contagion. My jaw locked tight. The taste of injustice is metallic, like biting a coin in half. And the most alarming concern, Delilah said, voice dropping to a somber tone, is the financial impact. Recent analysis indicates a severe decline in property values directly correlated with Mr. Ricks's continued violations. She clicked to the final slide. The falsified graph Jorge had already debunked. The red line plunged with my move-in date highlighted like ground zero. That's when Ruth struck. Point of order, she said sharply, her voice cutting through the noise like a gavel. As a homeowner and a retired paralegal, I demand to review the methodology behind this so-called financial analysis. Delilah froze. Her smile flickered like a dying bulb. Mrs. Kowalski, she began, we're following the appropriate— No, Ruth interrupted, snapping open her folder like a trap. According to verified MLS data, Willowbrook property values have risen 12% in 3 years. These slides are fraudulent fear-mongering, not fact. She marched forward and slammed the documents onto the table. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. These are official county records, she said, not doctored spreadsheets meant to terrify your neighbors into submission. The room shifted. Whispers turned to questions. Faces that once glared at me now turned toward Delilah with suspicion. The scent of doubt was thick and electric. Delilah's perfect mask slipped. While we appreciate Mrs. Kowalski's amateur analysis, she stammered, the board relies on certified market data which accounts for, like the fact, Jorge interrupted, standing tall, that Prestige Properties, your company, purchased 3 homes here below market value from families you harassed into selling? A wave of realization rippled through the room. The same people who'd condemned me moments ago now looked at Delilah like she'd just confessed to arson. The crowd murmured, questions rising like smoke. Delilah's composure fractured. Mr. Santos, you are out of order. This meeting concerns safety, not your conspiracy theories. Conspiracy? I said, standing slowly. My voice carried across the hall with the calm authority of 2 decades in uniform. You mean the conspiracy to forge HOA bylaws that never legally existed? I opened my folder like I was drawing a weapon. These, I said, holding up the original 1987 incorporation papers, prove that 90% of your so-called rules are completely fabricated. The reaction was immediate. A ripple of gasps that hit like a wave. Cornelius's tan faded 2 shades. Sandra's pen slipped from her trembling fingers. And that's not all, I added, displaying still shots from Jorge's footage. We have video evidence of deliberate harassment campaigns, orchestrated to force families into below-market sales to Prestige Properties. The room exploded. 40 people shouting, demanding answers, firing accusations. Delilah's carefully planned ambush had flipped into her own public downfall. This is inappropriate, she shrieked over the chaos, mashing her clicker as if it could rewind the night. But it was too late. The neighborhood she'd ruled through fear was finally waking up. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled homeowner, Delilah snapped, voice trembling between panic and pretense. The only thing baseless here, Ruth's voice cut through the uproar like a judge's gavel, is every lie you've told this community while stealing their money and manipulating their home values. The room froze. Delilah's flawless mask cracked. Her face went ghost white beneath layers of foundation. Her manicured hands gripped the podium so hard her knuckles blanched. Sweat beaded along her hairline despite the cold air circulating through the vents. The crowd sensed weakness. The woman who'd ruled them through fear now stood alone, surrounded by the very people she'd deceived. The smell of blood in the water was palpable, but I wasn't finished. The chaos was satisfying, sure, but what came next required complete silence. I reached into my pocket, unlocked my phone, and pressed play. A single audio file echoed through the community center's sound system. Clean, sharp, undeniable. Delilah's own voice filled the space. The Hendricks situation needs to be resolved quickly. We've got 3 closings next month, and buyers are starting to question neighborhood stability. If this property doesn't move in 60 days, we'll have to consider more direct action. The words hung in the air like a noose. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Even the air vents seemed to stop breathing. That recording, I said calmly, was captured last Tuesday, a private conversation between Ms. Thornburg and an unknown associate discussing my forced removal timeline. A ripple of whispers spread like wind through dry leaves, but Ruth was already on the move, stepping forward with precision that came from decades of courtroom battles. She set down a thick folder that landed on the board's table with the finality of a death sentence. "What Marcus doesn't yet know," she said, voice cutting the tension like a blade, "is that I've been quietly conducting my own investigation into the HOA's financial records." She opened the folder slowly, deliberately, like unveiling classified documents. "As a property owner," she continued, "I have the legal right to inspect all HOA expenditures." What I found was illuminating. She began pulling out evidence: bank statements, photocopied checks, invoices. A paper trail that drained the remaining color from Delilah's face. "In the past 3 years," Ruth said, holding up the documents for all to see, "this HOA has paid $47,000 to Thornburg Consulting Services for supposed maintenance and landscaping work." Her voice carried authority. Cool, unwavering, lethal. "The problem is," she continued, slapping down a set of photos, "none of that work ever happened." The photos showed time-stamped images of the same lawns, the same cracked sidewalks, the same faded signage, a month after month, year after year. No landscaping crews, no work orders, no new installations. Just nearly $50,000 of member dues funneled straight into Delilah Thornburg's private business account. The crowd erupted, a thunderstorm of outrage. 40 furious neighbors shouted over one another, voices fueled by betrayal. They weren't just angry now. They were done being afraid. Ruth raised her hand for silence. "And that's not all." Cornelius flinched like a man awaiting his verdict. "Every single payment," she said, "was approved and signed by Mr. Cornelius Blackwood without any recorded board authorization, directly violating HOA bylaws and state fiduciary regulations." Cornelius sprang to his feet, his practiced composure disintegrating. "Now hold on, Ruth," he barked. "Those payments were for consulting work. Consulting on what exactly?" Jorge interrupted, stepping forward with his laptop already open. "Because I pulled the incorporation documents for Thornburg Consulting Services." He turned the screen to the crowd. The company was created 6 months after Delilah became HOA treasurer. It lists only one service category: real estate market analysis. The realization spread like fire through dry brush. Whispers turned to mutters. Mutters became accusations. Neighbors who'd once worshipped Delilah now stared at her like a criminal caught mid-heist. From the back of the room, Mr. Peterson rose, his voice shaking with fury. "Let me get this straight," he said. "Delilah's been taking our HOA fees, paying them into her own fake company, using fake consulting invoices, and then manipulating property values to buy up homes cheap?" "That's exactly what's been happening," I replied, my voice clear, steady, resonant. "And every homeowner who's been bullied into selling over the last 3 years, every violation, every citation, every fine, was part of a coordinated fraud scheme, not community enforcement." That bitter taste of injustice I'd carried for months was gone. What replaced it was something clean and electric, the taste of justice served fresh. Delilah stood frozen at the podium, eyes darting, mouth trembling, watching her empire collapse in real time. Her kingdom of control and manipulation was burning down around her, fueled by the truth. This wasn't about mailboxes anymore. It wasn't even about harassment. It was about organized crime hiding behind a homeowners association, and in that moment, everything shifted. I wasn't just defending my property, I was leading a rebellion. The real war had just begun. When the meeting ended, the building emptied like an evacuation drill. But 15 residents stayed behind, the ones who'd heard enough to know this was bigger than petty neighborhood drama. We gathered under the humming fluorescent lights, rearranging metal chairs into a circle that felt less like a meeting and more like a war council. Ruth took command, her legal instincts kicking in. "First things first," she said, flipping through her notes. "We need to assess the legal framework. What we're dealing with isn't just civil misconduct. It's criminal conspiracy, embezzlement, and possibly federal wire and mail fraud." Jorge was already setting up his laptop. "I'll handle digital evidence. Every photo, every file, every recording gets duplicated and encrypted. We store copies in multiple drives before anyone realizes what we've uncovered." Mrs. Patterson, who'd sat silent during most meetings before, leaned forward, fire in her voice. "That woman ran off 3 of my closest friends with her bullying and fake citations. I'm in. Tell me what to do." Over the next 2 weeks, my garage transformed again, this time into headquarters. The smell of burnt coffee mixed with WD-40 as stacks of paperwork replaced toolboxes. The air felt charged with purpose. Ruth became our de facto legal strategist. Jorge oversaw surveillance and data archiving, and I coordinated our contact with law enforcement and local media outlets. Our first major breakthrough came when Ruth discovered something crucial. The state attorney general's office had a special division dedicated to HOA corruption. "We're not alone," Ruth said one night, flipping through her laptop. "Detective Sarah Morrison heads the task force. She told me there's been a rising trend, HOA financial crimes across 3 neighboring counties. But they need solid community-backed evidence to prosecute." Jorge nodded, scrolling through footage. "Then that's what we'll give them." His network of neighborhood cameras, discreet, fully legal, installed with homeowners' permission, began recording everything. Every suspicious visit, every file removed, every car that shouldn't have been there. "Take a look at this," Jorge said, pulling up video stills. "Delilah's made 17 unannounced stops at homes that later received violation notices. She's scouting targets, creating her own complaints." The evidence was piling up fast. But I had my own plan and something symbolic, something she couldn't resist. My steel mailbox project. 2 decades of Navy engineering came flooding back as I began designing it, a structure that could survive hurricanes, vandals, and egos alike. The outer shell would look identical to my grandfather's oak design, but beneath the surface, marine-grade steel, welded seams stronger than ship hulls, and enough embedded tech to make the Pentagon jealous. Motion sensors, HD night vision cameras, impact detection, GPS trackers, Jorge explained as we assembled components. The air smelled of cutting oil and solder. "We're basically building a surveillance fortress disguised as a mailbox." The specs were overkill, exactly what we needed. Pressure sensors calibrated to detect hammer strikes, 4K cameras feeding live footage to cloud storage, cellular uplinks immune to tampering, and battery backups that could run independently for weeks. And best of all, it was 100% within HOA regulations. Same size, same placement, same finish. She couldn't flag it. But she couldn't resist it either. "It's a trap," Ruth said one evening, watching sparks flash from my welding torch. The orange light danced across her determined face. "You're handing her bait, but making it impossible for her to win." Exactly. Meanwhile, the neighborhood began to shift. Mrs. Patterson started quietly rallying residents who'd been targeted. Each story added a piece to the puzzle. The Watanabe family cited for non-conforming landscaping after planting a Japanese garden. The Rodriguez family fined for noise violations after hosting family dinners, in Spanish. The pattern was unmistakable. Delilah's war wasn't just about power, it was about control, prejudice, and profit. And now, for the first time, she wasn't the one holding the cards. But this time, Delilah had come armed for war. "Oh, and Marcus," she said, flashing that predator's grin that belonged on a Discovery Channel special about apex hunters, not in a suburban driveway. "Judge Peaton signed an extension this morning. The restraining order now includes obstruction of emergency maintenance. If you interfere or even try to film, it's contempt of court." She passed me another set of documents, pages still warm from the courthouse printer. The new injunction barred me from photographing, recording, or approaching any HOA-authorized work crews. Even observation could land me in handcuffs. Engines rumbled as her hired demolition team began unloading their arsenal, massive sledgehammers, pneumatic drills, and acetylene torches that hissed with bottled fury. Diesel fumes mixed with the metallic tang of gas, creating a chemical fog that burned the back of my throat. "This is insane," Jorge shouted from across the street, camera raised. "You can't bulldoze someone's property on the basis of fake permits?" Delilah's voice sliced through the morning like a legal scalpel. "Mr. Santos, if you'd like to file a complaint, feel free. But as of now, this operation has official county authorization. Please remain behind the safety line. The men she'd brought weren't weekend handymen. They were professionals. You could see it in the way they handled their tools. Their foreman, a heavy-set man with scars crawling up his forearms, crouched beside my steel mailbox and tapped it with the flat of his hammer. "Marine-grade steel," he muttered, half impressed, half annoyed. "This thing's built to survive artillery fire. We'll need the big drills for this one." "Then use them," Delilah barked, losing the last of her polished composure. "I want it gone before noon." That's when I realized her critical mistake. The restraining order restricted me, but not my invited guests. And Detective Morrison had been very clear about what to do when the hammer finally fell. I pulled out my phone and hit the number she'd programmed. "This is Marcus," I said, voice steady. "The delivery's in progress." "Repeat, the package has arrived." 30 seconds later, Maple Street transformed. Unmarked sedans appeared at both ends, the kind of bland, nondescript cars that screamed "federal agents" to anyone who'd ever worked with law enforcement. Their windows were dark, their movements precise. The demolition crew noticed first. The foreman froze mid-step, his grip tightening around his hammer. He exchanged nervous glances with his men. Ma'am," he muttered, lowering his voice. "We might have a situation. Some serious eyes on us right now." Delilah didn't flinch. "We have permits," she snapped. "Keep working." The first blow landed. A thunderous clang ripped through the neighborhood, echoing like a bell tolling for judgment. The sound reverberated through the concrete and into my chest, but the mailbox didn't move. Not even a dent. The second hit produced a shower of sparks and a vibration that rattled the windows. The third swing snapped the wooden handle clean in half, and that's when the front doors of the federal vehicles opened in perfect unison. Detective Morrison stepped out, badge glinting in the morning sun, followed by a small army of agents in windbreakers. They fanned out with mechanical precision, covering the perimeter. "Delilah Thornburg," Morrison called, voice steady as bedrock. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, embezzlement, and violation of civil rights under color of law." For a moment, the world went silent. The crew froze. Neighbors stopped mid-breath. It was beautiful. 30 years of weaponized bureaucracy, undone in a single sentence. Morrison strode forward, reading Delilah her rights as agents closed in. The same neighbors who once avoided my gaze now watched with wide-eyed satisfaction. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying every word of that arrest across the cul-de-sac. "Delilah Thornburg," Morrison repeated, "you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Delilah's polished mask cracked like old porcelain. "This is harassment," she shouted, backing toward her Escalade. "I'm conducting official HOA business under municipal authority." Morrison raised another folder, thicker, stamped with federal seals. "These are warrants from the Department of Justice. Your emergency permits were obtained through false statements and forged documentation. That's federal fraud, Mrs. Thornburg." Gasps rippled through the crowd that had gathered like spectators at a neighborhood apocalypse. Front doors opened. Curtains twitched. Within minutes, the entire street was lined with residents watching their self-appointed queen lose her crown. Mrs. Patterson stood proudly on her porch, arms folded, the same woman Delilah once humiliated at a meeting. Ruth walked up the sidewalk, evidence folder in hand like a trophy. Jorge recorded everything, both on his phone and the multi-angle security feed streaming live to off-site servers. You'll want these. Detective, Ruth said, passing Morrison her thick stack of printed documents. They detail every financial irregularity we uncovered, cross-referenced with property sales and false citations. Morrison accepted them without breaking stride. Thank you, ma'am. This will make the prosecution airtight. The hum of tension was broken by the screech of tires. Cornelius Blackwood's BMW skidded to a stop half on the curb. His country club swagger was gone, replaced by the pale, clammy panic of a man realizing he was next. Delilah! What the hell is going on? He shouted, slamming the car door. His golf visor sat crooked, his voice trembling as he took in the agents, the flashing badges, and the neighbors recording from their lawns. Mr. Blackwood, Morrison said evenly, turning toward him. You're under federal investigation as well. We have evidence linking you to fraudulent transfers and coercion of residents. You'll need to come with us. Cornelius blinked, speechless, color draining from his face. You can't. This is conspiracy and aiding fraud, Morrison finished for him. Yes, we can. The demolition crew, suddenly very interested in staying out of prison, began packing up their tools with deliberate care. The foreman looked at me once, shook his head, and muttered, "We didn't sign up for this." As federal vehicles filled the street, the neighborhood transformed from battleground to courthouse lobby. Clipboards, cameras, and cries of disbelief filled the air. I watched Delilah finally break. Her confident stride collapsed into a stumble as agents guided her toward the sedan. Her hands shook as the cuffs clicked into place, her polished nails flashing under the morning light. She turned once, eyes meeting mine. For the first time, there was no smugness, just fear. "Marcus, you don't understand," she whispered, voice trembling. They promised me protection, but Morrison was already leading her away. That's what they all say. The metallic beast of a mailbox stood untouched behind her, indestructible, gleaming, a monument to defiance. Around us, whispers turned into applause. Not raucous, not mocking, just the relieved, exhausted sound of a community finally waking from a long nightmare. Jorge joined me at the curb, camera still rolling. "Think this'll boost property values?" He joked weakly. I laughed for the first time in weeks. "You have no idea." Ruth appeared beside us, her tone half triumphant, half disbelieving. After all this time, she really thought she could hide behind paperwork. "Paper burns," I said, watching the sedans disappear down Maple Street. "Steel doesn't." As the crowd slowly dispersed, the quiet that followed felt almost sacred. The neighborhood had been poisoned by fear for so long that peace felt like a foreign language. But now, standing beside the mailbox that had started it all, I finally understood what victory really looked like. It wasn't revenge. It was truth, documented, witnessed, undeniable. And in that moment, as the autumn wind carried away the last echo of Delilah's protests, I realized something simple. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes all it needs is a steel mailbox, a few good friends, and the courage to stand your ground. Detective Morrison didn't waste a breath. She signaled to the agent standing behind her. "Mr. Vincent Torres," she called out, voice like a courtroom verdict. "You're under arrest for criminal conspiracy and destruction of private property." Torres froze mid-motion, the color draining from his face. The sledgehammer slipped from his hands and hit the concrete with a metallic crack that echoed across Maple Street. Whoa, hang on," he stammered. "I'm just the contractor. She hired us through official channels." Morrison stepped closer, her badge glinting under the rising sun. "Legitimate channels you knew were being used to commit felony-level property destruction," she replied calmly. "Your company has been linked to at least 6 sites hit with falsified work orders in the last 18 months. Torres's jaw opened, then closed again like a man trying to swallow guilt. "You've got to be kidding." "Save it for your attorney," Morrison cut him off, and that's when the rumble of a van engine turned every head. A white Channel 7 news vehicle rolled into view, parking behind the federal sedans. The door slid open, and out stepped reporter Sarah Jules, her reputation for chasing corruption already legendary in 3 counties. She'd been in touch with Jorge for weeks, ever since he'd sent her the first data packet connecting Delilah's fake permits to multiple neighborhoods. Within seconds, her crew had tripods up, lights on, cameras rolling. "This is Sarah Jules, reporting live from Willowbrook Estates," she began, her voice steady and sharp, aimed straight at the lens. Moments ago, federal authorities executed multiple arrests involving senior HOA officials in what investigators describe as a multi-year real estate fraud scheme. Behind her, the scene unfolded like poetic justice on film. Delilah in cuffs, struggling to maintain an ounce of dignity. Cornelius half hiding behind his luxury BMW, and my steel mailbox, gleaming defiantly under the morning light, standing untouched amid the wreckage of their lies. Neighbors crowded the sidewalks, some still in pajamas, some holding coffee mugs, all united by disbelief and a quiet hunger for closure. Jules turned toward me, microphone extended. "Mr. Hendricks," she said, "you've been at the center of this entire investigation. Can you tell us how it all began?" For the first time in months, I smiled. The air tasted of freedom, not fear. "It started with a mailbox," I said, gesturing toward the hulking monument of welded steel that had outlasted every attack. It was my grandfather's design, one that our HOA president decided didn't fit her aesthetic standards. But when we fought back, we uncovered something much bigger than design codes. We found years of theft, fraud, and manipulation hidden under the banner of community improvement. Jules nodded, eyes sharp with journalistic instinct. Federal prosecutors have confirmed charges including embezzlement, mail fraud, conspiracy, and violations of civil rights statutes. Early reports suggest similar patterns in at least 3 counties. At that exact moment, Delilah, now seated in the back of an unmarked government vehicle, lowered her window just enough to hurl her final words. "You're all fools!" she screamed, her voice cracking under strain. "Without me, this neighborhood will crumble. Property values will tank. You'll regret this!" Her words didn't inspire fear. They sparked laughter. Dozens of residents erupted in cheers, shouts, and a few choice insults that Channel 7 would definitely have to bleep out. "Sell that, Delilah!" someone yelled from the back. Mrs. Patterson, standing at her gate with arms crossed, actually applauded. Then Ruth stepped forward, calm as a judge and twice as lethal. "Miss Thornburg's mistake," she told the camera, her voice crisp with legal certainty, "was believing property values are built on fear. They're not. They're built on trust. She destroyed that trust the moment she began exploiting her neighbors for profit. You could have heard a pin drop after that." Even Jules looked momentarily impressed. As the federal vehicles began to pull away, taking Delilah, Cornelius, and the demolition crew toward their inevitable arraignment, the air shifted. The tension that had hung over Willowbrook for years evaporated, replaced by something fragile but pure. Hope. For the first time since moving here, I saw real neighbors, not frightened residents. Jorge clapped me on the shoulder, his grin stretching ear to ear. "So," he said, nodding toward the steel mailbox that had survived it all, "what's the plan for your little tank-proof masterpiece now?" I laughed, running a hand across the dented metal surface. "I think it's going to stay right here," I said, "as a monument. A reminder that sometimes you've got to build something unbreakable to shatter something rotten." 6 months later, the seasons turned, and the scars of that autumn battle slowly healed. I stood in my driveway one cool spring morning. The smell of freshly cut grass mixing with coffee steam curling from my mug. Delilah Thornburg was now in federal custody, serving 5 years for fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Cornelius Blackwood got 3 years and a permanent ban from managing or joining any HOA board ever again. Torres, the demolition contractor, turned state's evidence, 18 months behind bars and community service hours building public housing. And Judge Harold Peaton, the state ethics board, forced his resignation before Christmas. His golf club membership didn't survive either, but those convictions weren't the victory I cared about most. The real win was what happened in the months after. Mrs. Patterson, who once trembled at every HOA letter, planted roses that climbed her porch rail like they'd been waiting years for sunlight. The Rodriguez kids played soccer in the cul-de-sac, laughing without a care, their voices loud and proud. Even Jorge's teenage son strummed his guitar on the porch most evenings, music drifting down the block where silence used to rule. For the first time since anyone could remember, Willowbrook felt like a neighborhood again. When January rolled around, the community held its first full HOA election in history. Every homeowner attended. No intimidation, no proxy votes, no forged petitions, just real people casting real ballots. Ruth, armed with integrity and a mountain of documentation, ran for treasurer. She won unanimously. After the results were announced, she raised a toast in my garage, our old war room. "To the end of tyranny," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "And to the world's toughest mailbox." Everyone laughed. And for once, it wasn't the bitter kind. I looked out toward the street, where that unbreakable box gleamed under the streetlight, patched and weathered but still standing tall, a symbol of everything we'd endured and everything we refused to lose again. Because in the end, it had never been about property values or bylaws or board meetings. It was about dignity. It was about neighbors defending each other when no one else would. And as the sun rose over a peaceful, reclaimed Willowbrook, I realized something simple but profound. Justice doesn't always arrive in sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a mailbox that refused to fall. When the dust finally settled, the neighborhood gathered for the first official HOA election under our new transparent rules. Jorge was voted in as secretary, no surprise there, and somehow the guy who built an indestructible mailbox got handed the president's gavel. My first act as HOA president? We tossed Delilah's bloated 30-page neighborhood compliance manual straight into a fire pit. The flames swallowed every clause, every power-drunk paragraph she'd ever used to terrorize us. In its place, we wrote a simple 3-page charter, clear, human, and fair. Every new policy required open discussion, public votes, and majority approval. Democracy in suburbia. Who would have thought? The audits recovered $47,000 in stolen HOA funds and another $23,000 in fake fines Delilah had funneled through her personal accounts. We decided that money had to do more than just sit in a legal trust. It had to mean something. So we founded the Willowbrook Community Justice Scholarship, a fund to send one local student to law school each year, someone who'd go on to fight HOA corruption and protect homeowners' rights across the country. Our first recipient, Maria Santos, Jorge's daughter. Watching her stand at the community center podium, holding that scholarship letter with tears in her eyes, hit harder than any courtroom victory. For the first time in years, pride, not anger, tightened my chest. And my steel mailbox? That thing had somehow become our town's unofficial landmark. Folks started calling it Fort Knox. Visitors used it for directions. Turn left at the unbreakable mailbox. Families brought relatives over just to take pictures beside it. The city's tourism board even listed it on their official map under local curiosities. I laughed so hard the first time I saw that I nearly spilled my mail across the curb. But beyond the laughter, healing finally began to take root. Mrs. Patterson, who used to fear even mentioning HOA letters, now hosted weekly coffee mornings where neighbors sat together venting, laughing, and sharing ideas instead of gossip. Across the street, the Henderson boy who once got fined for noise violations now strummed guitar on his porch every evening, by request. 3 families who'd packed their boxes, ready to escape Willowbrook, unpacked instead. They stayed. They decided it was worth fighting for this place after all. When May rolled around, we hosted our first ever Willowbrook Unity Day, centered, of course, around my absurdly famous mailbox. We had food trucks, local bands, a charity raffle, and a crowd favorite booth called Smash Your Own Mailbox. People lined up with foam hammers to destroy cardboard replicas of mine, laughing until tears rolled down their faces. By the end of the day, we'd raised $12,000 for the scholarship fund. The event drew visitors from 6 surrounding neighborhoods, each battling their own mini-dictators. Some came just to see where it happened. Others came looking for advice, and that's when we realized our little rebellion had become a movement. Detective Morrison still attended our monthly meetings, but now she wasn't there to investigate. She was there to teach. She'd stand before the group, gesturing with that quiet confidence that made everyone listen. "What you built here," she told us at the summer community dinner, "isn't just a win. It's a model. We're using your documentation methods in other counties now. You've probably saved thousands of homeowners from the same nightmare." Her words landed like sunlight breaking through months of storm clouds. That metallic taste of adrenaline, the one that had clung to me for so long, was finally gone. For the first time since the war with Delilah began, my shoulders relaxed. My garage smelled like sawdust again, not legal pads and late-night strategy sessions. Jorge and I turned our weekend project skills into something real, a small business called Santos and Hendricks Home Services. We fix, build, and restore homes across the neighborhood, no permission slips or HOA approval forms required. Ruth launched a legal aid clinic for HOA victims across the county, offering free consultations and classes on homeowners' rights. Between the 3 of us, we'd somehow built a safety net that stretched far beyond Willowbrook. Then came the knock on my door that changed everything again. A documentary crew had heard about our story. They called it David versus Goliath in suburbia. They spent weeks interviewing neighbors, gathering old footage and filming B-roll of our infamous Mailbox that started a revolution. The film releases next year, with all proceeds supporting the National Homeowner Protection Foundation. Who would have guessed? One man's overbuilt mailbox had become a national symbol of defiance. But the sweetest victory wasn't fame or documentaries, it was data. 6 months after Delilah's arrest, property values in Willowbrook rose by 18%, the highest in the county. Turns out people do want to live somewhere they don't have to fear their own HOA. The endless "for sale" signs that once littered the lawns vanished. In their place, swings, gardens, fresh coats of paint, families investing, not escaping. Evening walks became normal again. Laughter returned. And every single morning as I check the mail, I glance at that scarred steel box, pitted with dents from hammers, claw marks, and attempts to destroy it, and I can't help but smile. That mailbox isn't just metal anymore. It's a monument. A reminder that ordinary people, when pushed far enough, can topple systems designed to control them. Sometimes I catch tourists or families snapping selfies with it, kids posing like it's a national treasure. Maybe in a strange way it is, because that box doesn't just hold letters now, it holds proof. Proof that a community united is stronger than any bully with bylaws. Standing here, coffee in hand, watching my neighbors wave from their driveways. As the sun spills over our quiet streets, I realize I'm not tasting revenge anymore. It's something lighter, something brighter. I'm tasting hope. If you're out there fighting your own HOA nightmare, listen closely. Document everything. Find your allies. Build something they can't destroy, whether it's evidence, courage, or yes, even a mailbox. Because when ordinary people refuse to break, tyrants eventually do. And when that day comes, share your story. Tell the world what you did. Leave your experiences in the comments below. Let's keep this community growing. One victory, one voice, one neighbor at a time. And remember, every time justice is shared, it multiplies. This is HOA Stories, where the little guys take down the suburban giants one steel mailbox at a time.